Welcome to Alan Skorsky Reports. I'm Alan Skorsky. In 1948, following the UN vote, Israel declared its independence as the Jewish state. They were immediately attacked by 5 neighboring Arab armies who encouraged the Arab inhabitants to evacuate the land while they wiped the Jews out. But they failed. Following the war, Egypt took control of Gaza and Jordan took control of Judea and Samaria, renaming it the West Bank to delineate it from the East Bank of the Jordan River. From 1948 until 1967, there were no calls for an independent Palestinian state. In 1964, Egyptian-born godfather of modern-day terrorism, Yasser Arafat, with the support of the Soviet Union, created the PLO, with the single objective of driving the Jews out of Israel. Many Arab leaders in the region supported the PLO, who served as a useful distraction for their own brutal and corrupt leadership. From 1964 through 1967, again, there were no calls for independent Palestinian statehood in either Gaza or what they called the West Bank. Then in 1967, Israel delivered an aggressive preemptive strike against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, which led to Israel taking control of Gaza and reclaiming Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem. Fast forward to 1993 and the signing of the Oslo Accords, which called for recognition of Israel's right to exist from the PLO and Israel's relinquishing land to the Palestinian Authority to begin the process of Palestinian statehood. Of course, every time Israel made concessions, the PA took it as a sign of weakness and increased the terror attacks against Israel under the guise of an intifada. Moving fast forward again, following the October 7th massacre and kidnappings of Israelis by Hamas, there are now new calls demanding that Israel acknowledge an independent Palestinian state on their border, all the while Hamas and PA leaders call for renewed October 7s against Israel. Today's guest is a very brave and courageous man, Dr. Mudar Zahran, who is the Secretary General of the Jordanian Opposition Coalition and former employee of the Department of State. He has lectured and spoken out across Europe against the Kingdom of Jordan and their brutal and apartheid treatment of Palestinians in their country, and further believes that today's Jordan is the Palestinian homeland. Dr. Zahran, it is an honor to have you on our show today, sir. Thank you so much for being here.
The honor is all mine.
Okay, so let me begin with an easy one. Back in 2019, I believe it was, you addressed the European Parliament, and you called them out for their hypocrisy of always claiming to care about the Palestinians, all the while making their lives more miserable by pushing for BDS, which would have harmed the livelihoods of Palestinians. Today, we have another movement. We have Hamas and many of their supporters trying to destroy Israel and no interest in talking of independent Palestinian statehood. So with that, sir, I ask you to kind of guide us along. Where are we?
Well, we are where we were in 1929 when the first terror attacks began against Jews in British Mandated Palestine. Those were called Palestinian Jews. The massacres began in 1929 in Hebron, and ever since, as someone who has examined and studied, researched the conflict, it's the same deja vu, which is the conflict is artificial, and the conflict has been made to be as sustained for as long as possible, mainly by Western globalist forces, particularly many European countries. The concept is they look down, in many cases, on both Arabs and Jews as Semites, and there's a lot hugely vested strategic interest. Let's begin by looking at the map. Look at where Israel sits today. Israel is a very critical juncture in the universe on the map. Israel connects 3 continents together. Europe, because once you look at Syria and above, that's actually more like Europe, Turkey, and Africa and Asia, the Middle East, and all the way to the east. So this is a very critical juncture. In military science, they call this the point of gravity. So Israel, the location of the Levant country and Israel on the Mediterranean, it's a point of gravity. If you control it, if you create unrest in that area, you will be able to control everyone else. Divide and conquer, and the creating unrest is one of the oldest techniques by colonial powers, and colonial powers are not gone. One question: look at a country like Germany. I have nothing against Germany itself or German people, but Germany, what sway would Germany have on the Middle East and all of its wealth if it was not for the Arab-Israeli conflict? Germany every time would like to squeeze Israel by mentioning something about Palestinian rights. Well, Germany never mentioned a lot about human rights in Syria when Assad was butchering people. This is the bottom line. This conflict is necessary. It's a necessary tool, pretty much like other conflicts. Look around you, Alan. The war on drugs, the war on terror, the war on immigration. Until we had someone, whether you like him or not, like the decent guy in the White House right now, the whole operation thing was just like pretty much the Arab-Israeli conflict. Allow them to come in, then deport some of them, then create a whole budget to do that, create chaos, create fear, and control. This is all about control. I can assure you this conflict is bogus. The Islamic rhetoric, the radical Islamic rhetoric of the Hadith, is where the main problem comes from. And as a Muslim myself, as a practicing Muslim, later in this show, let's discuss why Muslims are so fixated on this conflict. That has been used, but you need to know terror groups walk on money. Terror groups exist because there's money financing them. Hamas has been lavishly financed by who? By countries who are considered the United States friends. So there is something any average Israeli or Arab or Palestinian or Jordanian must ask himself: why are the usual suspects funding both sides and supporting both sides? So again, this is not us versus you. This is not you versus us. This is two clowns playing a very bad comedy on behalf of someone else. Evidence of that, you just mentioned it. You realize how protected Arafat was? You realize how many Western sources prevented Israel from killing Arafat? My friend, he had Arafat, he's Israeli. He had Arafat when he was just 22 years old. He told me how in Lebanon he had Arafat at his gun site in Beirut. And his commanders told him, don't shoot. You're not allowed to shoot. You'll go to jail for the rest of your life if you shoot Arafat. This is all fake.
But, here is but at the same time, the world's economies are shaken and affected by what happens in the Middle East. Like every U.S. president, the last headache that they want is the Arab-Israeli conflict. Nobody wants to inherit it. You look at the last election, what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were trying to do, twisting themselves into pretzels. On the one hand, they were sympathizing with Hamas, but they couldn't come out and bash Israel. They bashed Israel, but they couldn't overbash because they didn't want to lose the Jewish vote. They couldn't over support Hamas, but they also couldn't also over support the Jewish, Israel. And then Joe Biden said that some of them have a point. And so you have parties shifting. You have left-wing Jewish groups pushing for independent Palestinian statehood. So I see it ever since I've been voting, and I'm 62. The Middle East has always been the greatest thorn of every administration.
Well, but let's talk about the policy, and I say things the way they are. And one of the first lessons you learn when you join three-letter agencies, I won't say who. One of the first lessons you learn is perspective versus perception. I saw one former CIA guy talking about it, which he was right. It's true. It's perspective versus perception. What you mentioned is a wonderful perception, and it definitely looks like that from the outside. From perspective, here's where most U.S. administrations stood. One, sustaining the conflict for as long as possible, claiming that there's a peace process, not a decision for peace, not a conclusion of peace, process.
Right.
Then supporting the Islamists and the Muslim Brotherhood in particular. Let's talk names. When Bush Jr., after 9/11, started deporting falafel stand workers in New York, gas station workers who don't even pray or read the Quran, he was welcoming the Muslim Brotherhood into the White House. You can look up the names.
Right.
Muslim Brotherhood leaders, their children, like Hamas leader Abu Marzouk, his daughter is an American. She holds an American passport. She used to live in Chicago, and only Google an article by the former deputy district attorney of New York. I forgot the name. Very talented man. I forgot the name. The article is titled "Hamas Made in the USA." George Bush Jr., according to WikiLeaks, the cables of the U.S. Embassy in Amman, and I used to work for the U.S. Embassy in Amman, they initiated connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. Same goes with Condoleezza Rice went and forced the president of Egypt to open the doorway for for the Muslim Brotherhood to win the elections in the parliament, because before that he controlled the parliament, they let them win. It's like a religion. It's like the dogma to support the Islamists and sustain the conflict for as long as possible. And then, for Jewish voters, it's easy. I hate to say this. Many people will get offended. For Jewish voters, just tell them what they want to hear. And tell them, we love Israel so much, we give it $3 billion a year. Israel doesn't need $3 billion. Israel doesn't need $3 billion with its GDP. With Israeli and Jewish innovation taking place in the country, those $3 billion are spent not in Israel's interest, on buying military equipment, which eventually bankrolls the executive in American, war factory, warmongers. None of this was about Jews. None of this was about Jewish control. Jews can't control a synagogue, Alan. Do you think Jews are going to control America? Seriously. So this is all about BS, nonsense. And the Jews here are the victims exactly like the Arabs. This is what I keep telling my Arab brothers and sisters. Look at the photo in Jerusalem. You'll see an Arab guy walking next to an Israeli 18-year-old who is holding an M16 assault rifle in Israeli uniform, army uniform. And if you look closely, both are victims. Both are being used. Before 1987, before the Intifada in 1987, and you and I are old enough to remember that, Alan, Palestinians or Arabs inside Israel were living the dream. Gazans would vacation in Tel Aviv. West Bankers would vacation in northern Israel. And you want to hear the kicker? We used to make all the Israeli benefit and pay without having to pay taxes. We didn't pay taxes. Because the West Bank was under occupation and Gaza under occupation because of Israeli law and international law itself, at the time, the Israeli army used to pay our entire utility bill. So we didn't pay for electricity. We never paid for water. So this is why you would, if you remember in the days, you would drive into Ramallah and you would see all these big houses and German cars. And then you would drive to the kippots next to Ramallah, and you'll see all beat up cars with Jews inside them. Because we were living the dream until 1987, when the Intifada was commissioned by George Bush Sr., whether you like it or not. Some Jews are probably American Jews are going to try want to stop bad-mouthing the Bush family. But okay, I am bad-mouthing them because they are who they are. The Intifada was the brainchild of Bush Senior, because the Israelis refused to sit down with Arafat. So he gave them the Intifada, where they had no choice. Evidence? Arab countries financed the Intifada. The Arab countries would never do anything like that without a pat on the shoulder from the US administration at the time. So it's about time we call things by their own name. I can give you a very similar conflict to this stupid conflict we've had for 8 decades. The Ukrainian conflict. Now that that a man in the White House doesn't like bloodshed, a man who's not benefiting from war, the war in Ukraine stopped. It's going to be a little more difficult in Israel, but it's going to stop. Under this administration in the next 4 years, and I want to mark my words, unless another fake pandemic takes place or any form of a global scale event takes place, this president will be able to end the Arab-Israeli conflict over the next 4 years. Remember this.
So it's interesting you say this because I've been to Israel a number of times. I've been to Ramallah. I've been to Hebron, through tours where I got to go to the Muslim side, and I heard from on both sides that Arabs and Israelis got along well until the peace process broke out, and that ruined everything between them. So now when I hear you say that, it reminds me of it. So okay, so a few things. Excuse me. I believe you as far as Trump goes. I mean, he is genuine. He wants a real, genuine peace process to happen. He's very proud of his accomplishments with the Abraham Accords. He's very proud that he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, to take that off the table. And now his very bold initial, declaration that he wants to evacuate Gaza. And either Israel or the U.S., I'm not sure because I'm listening to his words, but he's got something up his sleeve that nobody ever saw coming. So I don't know, I know I talk to Israelis and they see it that they're going to come back in and they're going to start buying real estate again. I don't know what's going to happen. I know that I think Egypt and Jordan both said that they're going to take in 500,000 Gazans, whether they're children, whether they're elderly. Then we have to follow up with what happens to the rest of Hamas, unless Israel is going to eliminate them one by one.
Okay, I can tell you my inside knowledge about this particular situation. First of all, it starts with the intentions. The end goal for Trump is to see the Gaza Hamas control finished. Trump doesn't want to evacuate all Gazans out of Hamas, but the way Gaza is today, Gaza is not going to be it's inhabitable for at least the next 15 years. The damage there is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. I've gone on my recent trip to Israel. I've gone southern Israel and I've visited somewhere close to northern Gaza, and I can see with the binoculars how bad the situation is. So it's not habitable, even if we wanted the Palestinian so-called Arabs to stay in Gaza. This is not going to happen. Now the intentions of the Gazans themselves. I can quote to you what a Gazan tribal chief said yesterday. The video is going viral. He said, with scores of Gazans next to him, right in Gaza, he said, quote unquote, if Hamas is to return to Gaza, I want to leave. I don't want to stay under Hamas. We need to understand, first of all, before we go where the Gazans want, the Gazans initially, if you open the door for them, not a single Gazan is going to be left behind. If Brooklyn or Manhattan turns into a demolition site, you would leave, Alan. If Southern Palm Beach becomes a demolition site, President Trump is going to leave and move his property somewhere else. It's common sense. We're all human. So the concept of Gazan fighting to the end is absolute nonsense. Let me stand again, and this is necessary to explain where Palestinians stand at the moment. We can't think kumbaya yet, hold hands and think kumbaya yet. The majority of Palestinians in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, they hate Jews with a passion. They have been indoctrinated for 35 years under the Palestinian Authority. It's the wholesale hate machine beyond what you can imagine. It's been indoctrinated to children, and they are much better off under the Palestinian Authority than Hamas. So they see the grass as much greener on the other side of the fence, and they think that the minute Hamas or Islam is going to take over, iPhones are going to grow on trees in the backyards. Well, that's what they think, and it's not going to happen. But the bottom line is, what would they do? Let me sum this up again, and I could never emphasize this. I've got relatives in the West Bank, my own relatives, family in the West Bank, but I have to call things in perspective, what they really are. West Bankers, if they have a go at the Jews, they would make the 7th of October look like child play. They would burn your child alive and feed it to you if they have to, Alan, because you're Jewish. If anyone talking about change of heart, change of mind in the West Bank, there are signs of it, but it's absolute nonsense because the majority have been trained and fed hatred for Jews. This will require at least 20 to 30 years of rehabilitation and re-education. So it is what it is right now. Too bad, but we're dealing with it. The people of the West Bank are crazy. Not because they're crazy. I don't hate my own people, but they've gone crazy over the Jews. On the 7th of October, sadly, I've never seen my people happier in the West Bank. They were happier than flies on feces. They were celebrating on the 7th of October. That's the people of the West Bank. On the other hand, the people of Gaza are totally different. The people of Gaza, when the Palestinians, when my people voted for Hamas, and again, I hate to be repeating myself like other interviews, but we need to emphasize this. When they voted for Hamas some 20 something years ago, Hamas ran on two tickets. One, ending the Jewish state and liberating Palestine from the Jews and, feeding them to the sea, to the fish, whatever. And the second ticket was that they're going to end Palestinian Authority corruption. I was working for, I wouldn't say where I was working then, but let's say I was working for a major Western government at the time. And one of my co-workers is Christian. She and her husband, they voted for Hamas. Just because they want the Jews gone and because they want the corruption to end. Because the Palestinian Authority's corruption is unspeakable. Well, guess what they got? The Jews didn't go anywhere. And the Palestinian Authority turned out to be an angel compared to Hamas when it comes to corruption. Hamas Hamas is a 300,000, a community of 300,000 people in Gaza. They are Hamas members, Hamas government body, 50,000 each, and then their families of 200,000. So you're talking about a ruling class of 300,000. The rest of Gazans, they hate Hamas with a passion. Hamas has, beats them up, locks them up, steals their money, makes them poor. You would drive into areas in Gaza. For example, one of the neighborhoods is called Ar-Rimal, the sand or the dunes. There used to be Ferraris in Gaza, Porsches in Gaza, recent modern Porsches in Gaza, Rolls Royces in Gaza, all to the leaders and the children, while the rest of Gazans were starving, literally. Not starving because of the so-called blockade, starving because Hamas took over everything by force. So those people hate Gazans. Many of them, I've spoken to dozens of them since 2014, since that war. I've been talking to them almost daily, and they all wish to go like, let Israel come back. We were better under Israel. We wish Israel would just take it over. So this is where they stand. But fast forward to today, we cannot fix such a broken thing. They need to go somewhere else, and this is where we need to stand. According to the Jordanian Citizenship Act, Jordanian Citizenship Law, Article number 3, 1954, every single Palestinian except Jews, because they were Palestinian Jews. The Jews were Palestinians under the mandate. They would, they would have Palestinian passport.
Correct.
Unless they're Jewish, every single Palestinian is naturally born Jordanian. That's the Jordanian law. There's more than that. Gaza, most of Gazans are not native Gazans. Native Gazans are Egyptians. They look different than the rest of us Palestinians. They have a different skin complexion. They eat completely different food, and they speak with Egyptian accent. Now, the majority of Gazans today are not native Gazans. They are refugees who fled from Israel upon Israel independence, and later in 1967 fled to Gaza. So they come from towns like Jaffa, Haifa, and elsewhere. Those people, according to Jordanian law itself, quote unquote, fled from Jordanian territory because they considered all of Palestine as Jordanian territory. So those are native Jordanians. According to Jordanian laws, they should never be denied the right of return to their country, Jordan. And this is where we should stand today. Many people start arguing with silly arguments. As you know, my PhD is in Arab-Israeli conflict, and a huge part of it was looking into declassified files from the British National Archives, the Zionist Archive, and elsewhere. So what I've learned then that, the concept, people start arguing whether Palestinians exist or don't exist. Many insist on using the word Palestinian between quotes. Well, that's silly, because just 53 years ago, United Arab Emirates didn't exist. All of the names you read today, Alan, are bogus, nonsense names made by the colonialists before they left, and many of them were made on purpose to create the chaos. There was never a Qatar, never a Kuwait, never a United Arab Emirates in history. There was never even Libya.
Right.
Long story short, don't argue whether the Palestinians exist or not. They exist, but they have a country. We have a country. That country is called Jordan. 78% of the land. And those Jewish suckers are settling for less than 22%. So we win. We win. We have 78% of the land. The only problem is we have a lot of idiots in the West who want the conflict to persist and continue and push forward for the next couple of centuries, or if not more. And they insist that Jordan is an independent country. And let me quote to you what, after meeting President Trump, what the King of Jordan said on television, just 48 hours. He addressed some, veterans, Jordanian veterans. And in front of him, he said that, quote unquote, I would never tolerate or allow Jordan to become Palestine. I will never tolerate the naturalization of Jordanians. Like Jordanians with the Palestinians, Jordanians, the Palestinian heritage, definitely more than 90%. There's evidence. There's U.S. Embassy cable evidence, and I won't get into it. There is enough evidence that the majority, up to actually 95% of Palestinian Jordanians are Palestinians. They are citizens. He is saying that he will never recognize them as citizens. A king of a country, that actually nullifies the existence of the state. This is not an intelligent man. Not only a sinister man, an evil man, he's not intelligent. In addition, he said that he would never allow Palestinians from either the West Bank or Gaza. This is a joke. This is against international law. And this is the problem. We have been calling Palestinians Israel's problem. The problem is not with the Israelis. The problem is with Jordan. And let me quote your best friend, I'm being sarcastic, your best friend Arafat, what he said. He said, the Israelis are fighting me over land. King Hussein is fighting me over land and human. This is how we live in Jordan. It's very ridiculous when some clowns on the left start calling Israel an apartheid state. Jordan is the only remaining apartheid state in the world. Jordan even has its own stamp for Jordanians of Palestinian heritage on the passports. The way they used to stamp Jews in Nazi Germany with that star on the chest, our passports are stamped in the same apartheid crazy method. We are prevented from most jobs. And let me just be clear here. Some people are saying, come on, Alan, you want to give the Palestinians a country in Jordan? Didn't you see we gave them Gaza? Didn't see what they did to us? You're crazy? Well, let me tell you something. Jordan is stable not because of King Abdullah, a man who barely spends any time in the country. Jordan is stable because of thousands of U.S. soldiers protecting both the borders and the country. Here's news for you. Jordan has the second largest U.S. military presence in the Middle East after Qatar. And sometimes, on occasions, the troops buildup was higher than Qatar. Those are the ones protecting the country. We don't have a functioning air force. We don't have a reliable army. Jordanian army lost every war they have been engaged in since 1948. Jordanian army doesn't have the equipment, the training, or the numbers. The only one who's keeping the country together are the Americans controlling the country. And the Americans, various administrations, chose this king to be in power. This is like having a reception guy for the building. Just pick another guy who would call things by their own name. Wake up to this, Alan. If we wake up tomorrow and there's a Palestinian secular president of Jordan, Jordan would be the duck that looks like a duck, squeaks like a duck, walks like a duck, walks like a Palestinian state with a Palestinian majority, with a Palestinian government body, with a Palestinian leader. The only issue is this has to be managed. The next leader has to be provided with certain stipulations because the American troops on the ground can remove him over the phone. Let's call things by their own name. We need this fix. Other than that, the Palestinians in Israel will be residents of Israel, not citizens of Israel. But if they want to vote, they can vote to a parliament in Jordan. They want citizenship passports to travel the world with. They can get them from a Jordanian office in Ramallah. And this pushes into the other concept, which is there will never be peace without the Palestinian Jordan, and there will also never, ever be peace without an Israeli West Bank. Israel must annex all of the West Bank area, whether you like the idea or not, because Israel is a thin, narrow, defenseless state. Was it not for an incredible military force by the Israelis and a very solid resolve, they would have been evaporated long time ago. So you need the West Bank. That would be a very focal point of gravity for Israel's stability and the well-being of the so-called Arabs and the Palestinians who live in the West Bank. They will be our citizens. They are our citizens. And they will be residents of Israel. And that could open the gate into other things, Alan. If someone is engaged in terrorism in Israel or terror incitement, they will be deported to their country, Jordan. They won't be kept in the West Bank.
But Dr. Zahran, again, these are all, I agree with everything you're saying, but let's just say for argument's sake that Jordan becomes Palestine and, that region calms down. There are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. They're scattered throughout Europe, throughout the United States, where they're calling for Israel's destruction. Iran threatening, to nuke Israel. So none of that is going away just because Israel and Jordan or the Palestinians in Jordan kind of worked things out where now Jordan, Abdullah, either he'll be exiled, however you want to, place it. It does not end the war that we're in. It does not end what's happening all across Europe, whether it's France, Brussels, Great Britain. Here in the United States, we're losing. You've got a whole Islamic movement led by CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations. They have a 5, 10-year, 15 plan of how they are going to take over. They are this close to taking over the Democratic Party here. So what even if everything you said, happened, it doesn't change anything that's happening everywhere else around the world.
Well, first of all, it changes that little place called Israel, because right now the Israelis are dealing with a lot of demons in the closet, including Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, the militants in the West Bank, and let me assure you here, the militants in the West Bank are in excess of 8,000. They are deeply connected to the state of Jordan. I'm not saying this because I hate the king of Jordan. I'm just telling you a fact. When a year ago, the first blood was drawn between the Israeli army and militants in Tulkarem, the brigades came out waving the bodies of so-called martyrs with Jordanian flags, not Palestinian flags. So the Jordanian intelligence is very well vested in the West Bank. So people cannot trust driving on the highway without having rocks thrown on them. You need to change that. You need at least a clean house and the Israelis could care less about what happens somewhere else as long as they stop having people shooting at them, killing their children, raping the women, threatening them even at their worship place. We also need to fix another place called Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Temple Mount, which is, I'm not going to get into the details, but according to Islam, according to Islam itself, Jews are fully allowed to pray on Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. And what we have right now is apartheid against Jews, which is against my values and my religions, preventing a monotheist from worshiping God. And that's only carried out because Jordans can control the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I'm not dodging the question. I'm just giving you an introduction. One, we have to identify the problem with my religion, with Islam. In Islam, there are two books. The book of the Quran, which is, we believe, were dictated to Muhammad by God himself. Then the books of the Hadith. The book of the Quran says a lot of nice things about Jews, and plus a lot of awful things about Jews. So if you put them together, you can, pick and choose, equal them out. You can at least say that the Quran says that the Jews, if worse comes to worse, were quote unquote promised the land. The land we're arguing about, according to the Quran, belongs to the Jews. Of course, there are other people who deserve rights in that land, like the Palestinians and the Arabs, but at least we can use that somewhat positive argument. And there's a lot of argument about whether the bad words against the Jews were against the Jews at the time that our prophet argued with, or against Jews in general. So there is slack there, and the majority of the book is not exactly evil. It's about how you worship God, respect their parents, and there's a lot of issues like most religious books, including some people having issues with the Torah and the Bible. That said, we have the book of Hadith. Hadith is 500,000 pages of various books. It was written 200 to 300 years after Muhammad's death. The book of Hadith, and I can say this in both Arabic and English, I don't care. The book of Hadith is insanity, absolute insanity. This is where we need to discuss this. Have you ever heard of this word, Alan? Al-Mahdi. Have you ever heard of that word?
Al-Mahdi, I don't know. It sounds, I watched Fauda 5 times. So I've heard words that sound like Al-Mahdi.
Okay. Al-Mahdi is the so-called Islam's Messiah.
Okay.
This man, according to the Hadith, no mention of him in the Quran at all. Not even the main books of the Hadith mention him. And he's considered a lie added to the Hadith. Even as messed up the Hadith books are, they still don't recognize him, but still he's there. Al-Mahdi is the Muslim Messiah who's coming by the end of time to liberate Palestine from Jewish occupation. He's going to destroy all the enemies of Islam and the enemies of humans who are spreading, quote unquote, adultery, usury, banks, abuse, murder. He's going to come and fight them all, bring peace to the earth, and he's only going to do it when he attacks the Holy Land through Jordan, crossing the borders with Jordan into the land west into the river where Jews will be situated. And Jews are going to hide behind trees and behind rocks, and the trees will start yelling at Muslims, "Hey, you Muslim, I have a Jew here, come and kill him."
Yeah, that we've heard.
That Al-Mahdi is the main structure, the epitome of this whole thing going, this whole problem going between us. Because this guy is supposed to be the Messiah that's coming, and every single one of them, imams, and most of the Muslims who want to liberate Palestine, when I talk to them, they bring up Al-Mahdi. And in many occasions, when I tell them that he's not even a confirmed story, that even the books of Hadith that mention the guy, they get mesmerized and they think that I'm an infidel for telling them that. I'm kafir, just like the US Secretary of State having kafir on his shoulder. So that said, this is where the problem lies. There's another problem, Alan. You think any of this, what's happened in the West, is by coincidence? No. There has been a deliberate policy of allowing Muslims into the West and enabling them to take over institutions, universities, cities, economies, and so forth. There is a much more sinister policy. You should try and research, and a very smart man, Alan, you should try and research policy to empower China. This policy, again, was started by the former US ambassador to China, former CIA director, former deputy or like vice president, and then former president George Bush Sr. The policy was these wealthy elitists, they saw the Chinese model of control as the more proper one, which they cannot control without much accountability. So all the policies has been to empower China and weaken the West. This is why they sent your factories to China. This is why China now owns most significant property in Canada. This is why China owns half of Silicon Valley. I repeat, China owns half of Silicon Valley. This is why China controls, and these are the words by some US officials, controls some of the substance used to produce fentanyl in Mexico. This is why China has been besieging you on all over the places, and no better way to do it by doing two things. One, flooding your gates with Muslims. Flooding your gates not even with the right kind of Muslims. Let me be clear. After 9/11, I personally noticed, and I was living in the United States, that educated, intellectual, secular Muslims were the ones getting kicked out. The radical ones were still getting in. In Germany, if you apply for asylum, and I have witnessed a lot of cases, people asking for help. If you just say the word Muslim Brotherhood, that you are a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, and you want to seek asylum in that country, you're gonna get accepted quickly. My Egyptian friend told him how he was a secular activist, and they almost got him deported. So there is a well-established policy to weaken the West, and above all, make you always scared. Because now, if you go with a kippah walking downtown Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, for example, you should expect to get a fellow Muslim to possibly hit you with something or call you a racist slur. They control you, they scare you. The situation in Europe is much worse. Again, I am a Muslim. I'm a practicing Muslim. I fasted Ramadan. We're enjoying the Eid right now. But facts remain facts. They imported the worst kind of Muslims, and the outcome was weakening the West. There was a point where I could have called them stupid or naive, but not anymore. This is a policy. This is not just a mess up.
It's interesting because I know, again, this is what brings me also to a part of the problem that we have here in America. I remember when Trump in his first administration wanted to have just a ban on 7 countries, just the ones that, North Korea, Iran, but the media termed it as a Muslim ban. And there were left-wing Jewish groups supporting them against Trump to bring them all in. So now he's trying to deport them, at least the ones who have expressed support for Hamas. But there are many, and I can see right now there is an alliance, between the Islamists and the Marxists, because they both hate America and they both hate Israel.
Well, I would be more concerned about who controls both. And I've seen money paid by a lot of philanthropists, questionable philanthropists at all of those organizations. It's amazing how usually the benefactor in both cases are the same person. So this is more about control, and this is about making the West weaker.
Yeah.
And this is why, let's go back to the Middle East. This is why, I hate to say this, there has been a lot of cases where a lot of so-called think tanks in the U.S. have been screaming calling out Islam for the past 20 years. Islam this, Islam that. Islam is going to take over the West, and while they completely and swiftly overlook China's influence. Let's go to the Middle East. Let's see the Chinese threat to the state of Israel. China controls the following governments by the throat. The first government is Egypt. According to the Egyptian president himself, when he first took over, there was an economic, collapse due to bad management and many other things. And he said the only ones who saved him were the Chinese. And King of Jordan has signed an unnecessary energy producing deal with China, which has enslaved the Jordanian economy to Chinese power, even though it was about free gas. And it turns out the Israelis were giving him cheap gas, much cheaper than the Chinese would give him. And he still went with the Chinese. Iraq and Iran. Many people go like Iran this and Iran that. Iran is an evil Islamist Shiite regime. Many people don't realize the difference, but they are Shiites. They're completely different religion to Islam. But the Iranians, they are a facade for China. When you say Iran did this, Iran did that, it's actually China. This is not a theory. The Chinese have a mutual defense agreement with Iran. They have a couple bases in Iran. They have a whole Chinese mini city, like a town on the Hormuz Strait, where they have Chinese intelligence and military officers with their families, kids, the whole 9 yards. And they are collecting intelligence about US and everyone else all over the place. This is not some cooperation with China. This is a marriage between the Chinese and Iran. And also Iran is controlled by Iraq, controls Iraq. Therefore, China controls Iraq. And I can quote an Israeli Arab general. I met him on my last trip to Israel in December, I would say November and December. He told me, this is what this man told me. His name is Qais al-Mazarib. He's a veteran Arab war hero. He's still active. He's in the reserve now, but still he fought in Gaza, got injured in Gaza. Married to a Jewish woman. He's got 2 of his kids fighting in Gaza as we speak. Very impressive man. And I started talking to him about China, and he told me, well, we know Iran is China. That's what an Israeli general told me.
Wow.
So without, of course, giving much commentary about it, but it seems that the Israelis know very well who they're dealing with.
Right.
So the Chinese are way more sinister and powerful than you think. The Chinese were in full swing, I wouldn't say full swing operations with Hezbollah when it comes to the trade, whatever the trade is. I won't use the word. And they also were very friends with Bashar al-Assad. And there's someone else the Chinese control, which is Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis in Yemen are Hashemites, and they are relatives to the King of Jordan. They're considered the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. I don't believe they claim, but that's what they claim, and so does the King of Jordan. So Jordan and the Houthis are best friends, in case you didn't know. The Houthis, even though they're barred from entering any country in the Middle East, except a few. One of those few is Jordan, where the Houthis travel freely to Jordan and get their fighters and terrorists, receiving medical treatment in Jordanian hospital. The Houthis and Jordan, Yemen and Jordan, they both aligned with China. So this is the C word in this case. China is least referred to because I think some people are actually afraid to even mention it in the United States. A lot of think tanks, I think they would lose a lot of donations if they bring up China. But China is now the most viable intelligence, economic, and military threat that both Israel and the United States face.
Correct.
Because let's be honest, let me just put a word about Israel. What's the worst Hamas can do? Massacre and rape and butcher 1,200 Israelis in one day.
Right.
It's horrendous. It's awful. But it's not going to bring down the Jewish state. Well, China has methods to actually launch World War III. So China has the fangs, the claws, and the money to burn. Therefore, it is the biggest factor in the region right now, and that controls what's about to happen. And by the way, let me be clear about Hamas. Hamas used to control the most focal point in the map of the world, Gaza. The point of gravity of the world is the Levant, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. And the most focal point in that map is Gaza. It's like the nail that connects everything together. If you control Gaza and cause problems, that map will never be relaxed. Well, Hamas is controlled by, Hamas is identified as, quote unquote, the Palestine chapter of Jordan's Muslim Brotherhood. And Jordan's Muslim Brotherhood is fully, and I've documented that with article, is fully aligned and fully connected to the King of Jordan. And the King of Jordan is friends with China. So that gives you an idea how influential China is and how much of a role China had in this whole business.
Dr. Mudar Zahran, I could speak to you for hours. You have enlightened, and I thought that I knew a lot of things. You kind of blew me away with the whole George. I mean, we knew that George W. Bush, the senior, we knew that he was involved with the globalists. We know that Jim Baker was certainly no friend of Israel. And I would love at some point in the future to pursue this again, because this is something that's very, very newsworthy. It's been an absolute honor to have you. I would love to please have you again because, again, I think you could teach us so many things from your experience. There were a lot of things I didn't get. I want to talk more about, where the future of Jordan is going to be, but we'll do that another time. I hope we can have you again. And again, I thank you so much. Or as one of the words I learned when I was in Ramallah, shukran.
Afwan, shukran, habibi. May God bless my Jewish friends in the United States and elsewhere. May God bless this Am Israel. And may we someday celebrate Am Yarden and Am Israel together.
Okay.
Looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you,
so much.
Laila Tov.